Hey guys, tonight we begin with the marble-clad, urine-soaked, sun-baked reality of ancient Rome, a place of emperors, engineering, and everyday misery. Sure, we remember it for aqueducts, legions, and epic togas flapping in dramatic breezes. But beneath the marble gods and chiseled philosophers was a city churning with sewage, screaming, and sweat. A city where you, yes you, a regular plebeian without coin or clout, are about to spend one full day, and you're probably not making it to sundown. So before your sandals melt on the cobblestones, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop a comment. What time is it where you are? Are you tucked into bed or stuck on a night shift in a warehouse with worse ventilation than a Roman bathhouse? Either way, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Welcome to ancient Rome. You're going to hate it. You wake up to the sound of someone dying. Not metaphorically, actually dying. A neighbor 3 doors down is coughing blood again, probably the same guy who's been vomiting into the alley for the past 2 nights. You'd complain, but you're too busy trying to breathe through your own personal bouquet of mildew, urine, and yesterday's cabbage. Your home is an insula, a Roman apartment block built like a Jenga tower made entirely out of dust, mouse bones, and municipal indifference. You're on the 4th floor, which is a polite way of saying you're going to die in a fire or a collapse, dealer's choice. The walls are thin enough to hear your upstairs neighbor snoring, scratching, and occasionally defecating into a bucket that might or might not be dripping. You've got one room, no kitchen, no bathroom, no privacy, just a wooden sleeping platform and a shared mattress that hasn't seen fresh stuffing since Nero was in diapers. There's no glass in the window, just a gaping square hole covered with a greasy scrap of linen to keep the pigeons out. Spoiler, it doesn't. One of them nested on your rafters weeks ago, and now you have an extended family of sky rats, cooing you awake with the subtle grace of a chariot accident. The sun is already punching through the eastern wall, turning your room into a warm, wet sock. You're sweating under a wool blanket that smells like goat and regret. There's no insulation. The heat rises through the floorboards from the shops below, a bakery, a fishmonger, and something that sells pickled things in jars with no labels. The smells mix into a fragrant fog that hugs your skin and tells you to stay horizontal, but you can't. Not because you're motivated, but because someone just dumped their night jar into the alley and the splatter hit your window. Rise and shine, citizen. You roll out of bed and step straight into something sticky. Could be spilled wine, could be blood, could be fermented olive paste. Doesn't matter. You wipe it off with the edge of your tunic, which hasn't been washed since the last Saturnalia, and continue. Your back cracks like a cursed scroll as you stretch. You're 25, which in ancient Rome is already considered midlife if you're poor. Your knees ache, your jaw clicks, and you have a suspicious rash on your hip that you're ignoring with professional discipline. There's no mirror. Your reflection lives in a tarnished bronze bowl that's currently upside down, collecting dust. You reach for your water jug. Empty. Again, your flatmate must have finished it last night and not refilled it. You'd yell at him, but he moved out 2 weeks ago and you still haven't found a new roommate. Instead, you're sharing the place with a widow, her sickly nephew, and a cat who might be pregnant or dead. You're not sure. Time to start the day, which means time to find water. The public fountain is 5 blocks away, down a staircase that was built when the Republic still had optimism. Each step is slick with algae and pigeon droppings, and you cling to the rail like your life depends on it, because it does. You pass your landlord on the way down, who ignores you like always unless you forget to pay rent, in which case he screams loud enough to wake the Etruscans. On the street, the noise is instant and overwhelming. Vendors shouting, donkeys braying, metal clanging, a toddler crying because he dropped his fig and his mother threatening to sell him to the Gauls. Your sandals slap against stones soaked in the combined offerings of Rome's underclass. Sweat, wine, piss, and rain that hasn't fallen in a week. The smell is a wall, and your nose is the battering ram. The line at the fountain is long. It always is. A child is screaming about being skipped, an old woman is muttering prayers to Minerva, and someone behind you is clearly picking lice out of their hair and flicking them into the crowd. You clutch your clay jug like a lifeline. When you finally reach the fountain, the water comes out in a sad, dribbling arc, barely enough to fill a chamber pot, let alone your jar. You collect what you can and turn around, only to be nearly trampled by a passing cart full of amphory and shouting slaves. You sidestep into a puddle of something disturbingly warm. Your day has officially begun. And now, back in your apartment, it's time for breakfast. Brace yourself. There's no bacon, no bread with crusty edges, no honeyed porridge with dates and a hint of cinnamon. You get pulse, a bland, watery gruel made of boiled spelt or millet, depending on what the market stall was selling yesterday. It's gray. It tastes gray. You spoon it out of a cracked clay bowl with a chunk of wood that once dreamed of being spooned before life humbled it. No meat, that's for festivals. No fruit, that's for the wealthy. No eggs, those belong to chickens, and the chickens belong to your landlord. You sip a bit of watered-down vinegar wine to wash it down, hoping it kills whatever's growing in your gut this week. It doesn't, and that's your morning. You're already exhausted, already sweating, already questioning the point of it all. But the empire runs on the backs of people like you. The quiet, the dirty, the anonymous. And the gods, if they're watching, aren't answering. Welcome to Rome. You don't live in a villa. You don't even live in a respectable hovel. You live in a Roman insula, a glorified pile of tinder stacked atop expired mortar, rising just high enough to kill you in a fire, but not high enough for anyone to care. It's technically an apartment building if by building you mean something slapped together by the lowest bidder using bricks filled with air and optimism. The wealthy live at the bottom, near the street level, where it's cool, shady, and water flows. You're on the 4th floor, which means you live in a zone known to Roman engineers as not our problem. Your walls are made of plaster that crumbles when you breathe too hard. You share them with your neighbors, not metaphorically. Literally, you can hear them sneeze, argue, cook, and, on less fortunate nights, attempt procreation with all the grace of 2 wine-sloshed pigs trying to wrestle a curtain. Your ceiling leaks when it rains, and your floor creaks when it doesn't. The wooden beams supporting your room were installed in the reign of Tiberius and haven't seen maintenance since he fell off the map. At night, you fall asleep to the gentle lullaby of woodworm chewing through your ceiling joists. One good shake, an angry god, a marching cohort, or a neighbor with gout, and the whole place could collapse like a poorly planned satire. The stairs are the real gamble. You descend them every day with the same prayer. Not today, Jupiter. They're steep, narrow, and always damp. No one knows why they're always damp. The prevailing theory is rot. Or ghosts. One misstep, and you're just another body in the alley, chalked up to bad sandals. And yes, people fall. All the time. You once saw a bread seller tumble from the 3rd floor, bounce off a laundry line, and land in a barrel of fish brine. He walked away with a limp and a new nickname, Tunny Food. There is no kitchen in your room. There is no bathroom. There is no privacy. What you have is one shared space where you sleep, eat, argue, and occasionally vomit, sometimes all in the same corner. If you want to relieve yourself, you use a chamber pot, and then you carry that chamber pot down 4 flights of stairs and pour it into the alley, which already smells like shame and overripe olives. If you're feeling generous, you shout a warning, cave can 'em, or just heads up. But no one listens. They've been hit before. The floor is packed earth covered in old rushes. The rushes are decorative in theory, but in reality they're just a soggy, matted carpet of straw, flea eggs, and dropped lentils. Your bedding is a straw mattress, so flat it might as well be a woven lie. Fleas are standard. Lice are inevitable. You share the mattress with anyone who happens to need a place. Family, strangers, the odd drunk who mistook your door for a bakery. Some people pay for warmth. You settle for not being stepped on. Oh, and pests. The true roommates. Rats are bold. They stare at you. They form a union. Mice are everywhere. Cockroaches are timeless. And pigeons have taken up permanent residence in your rafters, cooing softly like winged debt collectors. Sometimes you think you hear a snake. You're never quite sure if that's worse or better. There's a small shelf with your worldly possessions, a chipped oil lamp, a worn tunic, one clay bowl, and a half-used bar of soap you keep not for hygiene, but because it smells like a better life. You tried cleaning the place. You've really tried, but you can't mop despair, and you can't sweep away poverty. The grime is baked in like old bread on amphory. Still, you survive. That's the miracle of the Roman underclass. You endure. You duck falling beams, dodge rats, and avoid the latrine splash zone with all the agility of a seasoned gladiator. The rich have palaces. You have walls that haven't murdered you yet. And in this city, that's what passes for luxury. Tomorrow the building might burn, crumble, flood, or just collapse under its own hypocrisy. But for now, it's home. You've got your fleas, your floor, and a slightly squashed fig someone dropped through the ceiling crack. Welcome back. You wake up starving. Not peckish, not snacky, starving. Your stomach is folded in on itself like a crumpled toga and is now growling like an alley dog. You haven't eaten since the night before, and even then, it was barely a handful of lentils and a cup of something that tasted like foot vinegar and old sandals. Your mouth is dry. Your tongue feels like it's been coated in ashes, and your breath could be used as a form of crowd control. But don't get excited. In ancient Rome, breakfast isn't a reward, it's a test. A gritty, flavorless, depressing ritual that serves one purpose: to keep you vertical until your next brush with death. There is no dining room, no quiet table with fresh-cut fruit, no sunlight dappling a platter of cheese and sliced honey-drenched bread. You crouch in the same corner you slept in, balancing a dented bowl on your knees while swatting at flies that seem more interested in your meal than you are. Your breakfast nook is a part of the same single-room rental that contains your mattress, your bucket latrine, your goat, if you're lucky, and your disappointment. The air smells like mildew, boiled turnip steam, and foot. You've already given up on separating the scents. Today's menu is the same as every other: pulse. A slurry made from overboiled grain that somehow manages to be both watery and sticky at once, like someone tried to make oatmeal, failed, and then decided to punish you with it anyway. It's made of barley, or spelt, or millet, whichever was cheapest and least moldy at the market. If you're lucky, it holds its shape when you tilt the bowl. If not, it just sags like your enthusiasm. You scoop a portion with your fingers, the same fingers you washed last week, and shovel it into your mouth while avoiding eye contact with the corner where the rats live. You can hear them chewing on something. Possibly your sandals. Possibly last week's leftovers. Possibly each other. The flavor? Imagine soggy chalk mixed with the tears of someone who once tasted a date and never recovered. There's no salt, too expensive. No spices, out of your class. And no oil. That's for the priests, the rich, and the statues that get oiled more often than your body. If you're really, really lucky, and you're not, you might find a splash of goat milk or a crumb of last week's cheese grated over the top like a tragic garnish. The cheese is sour, bordering on cursed. It leaves a film on your teeth and a question in your soul. Is this what life is now? On special days, meaning days someone else died and you inherited their kitchen scraps, you might get a dried fig or a piece of black olive so shriveled it looks fossilized. These are not flavor bombs. These are bitter, salty punches to the tongue that say, "Congratulations, you still exist." Bread? Forget about it. Real bread is for the bakers, the temples, and the men who don't bleed from the mouth when they chew. The kind you'd get, if you could afford it, is rock hard, baked days ago, and used more often as a weapon than a food. You once saw someone kill a mouse with a crust. True story. And then there's the drink. You'd think, surely they drink something nice. Wine, right? This is Rome, the land of Bacchus and grapes and poetry. No, you get Pasca, a beverage so basic and depressing that it should come with a warning label. May cause existential despair. It's water mixed with vinegar, not for flavor, but because the water itself is actively trying to kill you. The Tiber is a flowing tapestry of waste, curses, runoff, ash, dead cats, and hopeful lies. You don't drink from it, you survive it. And Pasca, sour and gritty, is your survival mechanism. You sip it, wince, and wonder what you did in a past life to deserve this flavor profile. Flies buzz around your bowl with the desperation of tax collectors. They dive bomb your fingers, land in your gruel, and sometimes just drown it outright. You fish them out with your finger, flick them onto the wall, and keep eating. They always come back. You're not eating with flies. You're eating among them, like guests at a banquet held in a stable. Every bite is accompanied by a slap or a muttered curse. One lands on your lip, and you nearly inhale it. You don't spit it out. There's protein in that. If you're a woman, things are worse. You don't eat first. You don't eat warm. You don't eat until the men and boys have scraped every last usable bite from the pot, and what's left is tepid, gluey sludge with the consistency of regret. You eat standing, quietly, often while still working, grinding more grain, hanging laundry, swatting toddlers. You don't get full. You get functional. And if your child needs food more than you smile and hand it over. It's not nobility. It's Roman motherhood. And if you're enslaved, you watch others eat. You wait, standing by with a clay cup in hand, not allowed to speak unless spoken to, not allowed to sit unless collapsing. You hope your master leaves something behind, a crust, a rind, a bit of juice clinging to the bottom of a bowl. You lick it clean. You rinse your mouth with a stolen sip of water. You do not complain. You're not a person. You are functionally furniture with lungs. Meanwhile, in the domus of a wealthy senator, breakfast is a theatrical production. Honeyed cakes, imported dates from Syria, figs soaked in wine, eggs sprinkled with herbs, warm bread with sesame seeds. Slaves attend to the table in silence. Gold cups, silver knives, meat in the morning, a symbol of divine favor. The senator belches and waves a hand. He doesn't finish his food. It's thrown to the dogs. You dream of being one of those dogs. Back in your tenement, the noise never stops. Children cry. Adults curse. Someone's arguing about fish prices. Someone else is throwing up in a jar. You're still eating. The porridge is cold now. You scrape the sides of the bowl, hoping to find something extra, a hidden blessing, a second chance at fullness. There's nothing, just the taste of clay and defeat. You finish your meal in silence. Your tongue is dry, your teeth feel gritty, and your stomach is still growling. But you've eaten. That's what matters. That's what keeps you moving. There's no satisfaction, only postponement. Hunger is your constant companion, but at least for the next hour or two, it walks a few steps behind you. You lick your fingers, rinse your bowl in gray water that might be cleaner than your feet, and breathe in deep. It's going to be a long day. You've eaten, or more accurately, you've absorbed enough tasteless mush to stop the shaking in your hands. Your stomach is still whispering threats, but it's agreed to hold off open rebellion for now. And so, with aching joints, sticky fingers, and a vague sense of shame, you rise. It's time to face the city. Not the city in poems or mosaics. Not the idealized marble paradise that shows up on frescoes or tourist pottery. No, this is the real Rome. The one that breathes filth, screams profanity, and smells like something crawled out of the Cloaca Maxima and died in the sun. And it's waiting for you. You take a deep breath, immediately regret it, and step outside. The noise hits you first, a full symphony of chaos. Voices overlapping, dogs barking, chickens losing their minds, carts rattling, infants crying like they've seen the future and are rightfully horrified. Someone is shouting in Greek, someone else in a dialect you don't recognize, and a third person is screaming at a goat that seems to be winning the argument. And all of this is happening in a street no wider than your wingspan, wedged between insulae that lean toward each other like gossiping old men. The road beneath your feet is stone, mostly. Some of it is patched with dirt, some with ancient garbage compacted over generations, and some with substances better left unclassified. The Romans were engineers, yes, but when it comes to urban hygiene, they were more philosophically flexible. You walk carefully, stepping over puddles of unknown depth and origin, dodging piles of donkey droppings, and praying that what squished under your sandal wasn't something sentient. Water runs down the center of the road in narrow channels. Technically part of the drainage system, realistically just open sewers dressed up as civic planning. You breathe through your mouth. Then stop doing that, too. The buildings loom overhead, 5, 6, 7 stories high, built of crumbling brick and wood, so close together they block out the sun. Laundry flaps from windows like surrender flags. Broken amphorae pile up in corners. You pass a man dumping the contents of a chamber pot out the window with a lazy flick of the wrist and a half-hearted shout of cave. The splash hits the street just ahead of you. Congratulations, you've won another round of Roman roulette. Vendors line the street, each with a stall that looks like it was constructed during a riot. One is selling slightly green vegetables. Another hawks dried fish that have been drying since the previous emperor. A third, more enterprising soul, is yelling about fresh bread, even though the loaf in his hand looks like it could be used to defend the city in case of siege. There's no standard pricing. You haggle, you shout, you threaten to go elsewhere. You don't. You've got 2 coins in your purse, and both are so worn the emperor's face is just a vague, disappointed smudge. You're jostled constantly. The streets are packed, slaves on errands, citizens late to meetings, street performers pretending they're not pickpockets. One man walks by with a live pig on a leash. Another is dragging a broken statue head through the mud, muttering about divine bargains. You step aside to let a litter pass, the kind carried by sweating men and containing someone rich, reclining on cushions, fanning themselves while sneering at the masses. You catch a glimpse of their sandals. Clean, white, untouched by road filth. You'd murder for those sandals. And the foot inside. Every few feet, you pass graffiti, scratched into stone or painted with crude charcoal. Political slogans, vulgar jokes, declarations of love, all layered over each other like an argument that's lasted years. You read one. Lucia is a whore. Another. I screwed Marcus here. Below that, no, I did. Rome has no secrets. Only rumors wearing sandals. And then there's the smell. It's not one smell. It's a rotating ensemble. Day-old urine. Fresh manure. Vetech. Overripe fruit. Cheap perfume. Rotting fish. Burning fat. Human desperation. The occasional waft of incense from a passing priest, which somehow makes it all worse, like a mint leaf in a dung heap. You pass a butcher stall, and the scent hits like a slap. There's a goat carcass hanging by its feet, flies clinging to it like pilgrims. A river of blood runs down into the gutter. A child plays with a severed hoof nearby. You look up and see smoke in the distance. Someone's fire has gone rogue again. Happens all the time. The fire brigade, the vigiles, are mostly conscripts with buckets and grudges. By the time they arrive, 3 buildings will be gone, and half the neighborhood will be stealing bricks from the ashes. You consider going the other way. Then remember you live in a wooden box 4 stories up. Fire safety is a myth you can't afford to believe in. A cart lumbers past, its wheels catching on every stone. The driver swears, beats the mule, swears again. You flinch as the mule sprays something near your leg. It's warm. You tell yourself it's just water. You know you're lying. Up ahead, a woman is giving birth in a doorway while an old man pours wine on her feet and yells at Mars. A man urinates against a wall. A street musician plays something that might once have been a lyre, but now sounds like 2 cats fighting inside a shield. This is Rome. Alive, loud, diseased, glorious, disgusting, everything at once. You duck under a hanging sign, a crude carving of bread and grapes. A tavern. You think of breakfast again, but your stomach twists in protest. You keep walking. You've got work to find, coins to beg, errands to run, and gods to ignore. Because the street is your hallway, your toilet, your temple, your news feed, and your battlefield. Every Roman lives half their life on the road. And you, dirty, tired, half-fed, are no different. You've been walking for a while. Maybe to get water. Maybe to look for work. Maybe just to escape the smell of your own apartment. But now a new urge overtakes you. One you can't ignore. Your guts rumble ominously, and you know what time it is. It's time to relieve yourself. In modern terms, you just duck into a cafe, find a bathroom with a door, a flush, some privacy, and maybe even a scented candle. In ancient Rome, none of those things exist. Instead, you must confront one of the empire's most efficient yet emotionally scarring inventions, the public latrine. You make your way to the nearest one, a communal toilet block attached to a bathhouse, an open-air market, or sometimes just wedged between buildings like an architectural afterthought. There's no sign, just the smell. A complex, nauseating bouquet of human waste, stagnant water, mildew, and despair. You pass a few children playing in the drainage trench, splashing like it's a fountain. You vow never to drink from that fountain again. You enter the latrine and are immediately greeted by a row of stone benches, each one carved with round openings about the size of a loaf of bread. These are the seats. There are no stalls, no doors, no modesty, just you, your shame, and 30 strangers locked in eye contact over their exposed buttocks. You pick a spot that looks least crusted with tragedy and shuffle toward it. The stone is cold. It's always cold, even in summer. You lift your tunic and sit down carefully, making sure your toga doesn't drag across the floor, a mistake you made once and never forgot. The hole opens into a channel below, a sluggish trickle of water meant to carry waste away. It doesn't. Not really. It just sort of marinates everything and drags the worst bits slowly toward the Cloaca Maxima, where Rome's sins collect like soup in a cracked bowl. As you relieve yourself, a man next to you begins a friendly conversation about grain prices. Another complains about his wife. A third sneezes violently and laughs. There is no boundary here, no personal space. If someone wanted to stab you mid-defecation, they'd only have to lean slightly to the left. You've heard stories. Everyone has. You don't turn your head. You don't break eye contact with the middle distance. You simply endure. And then comes the worst part, cleaning up. There is no toilet paper, not even rags. Instead, there's the communal sponge on a stick, the tersorium. It sits in a trough of cloudy water and vinegar, soaking like a forgotten relic of a more hygienic civilization. You look at it. It looks at you. You reach for it like a condemned man grabbing the executioner's axe. You do what must be done. You wipe, slowly, carefully, then return it to the trough. Try not to think about how many other people have performed this exact grim ballet before you today. You whisper an apology to your ancestors. Behind you, a rat scurries by, bold as a tax collector. A child peeks through the entrance and laughs. The woman across from you adjusts her robes and begins to hum. And you, full of regret and partially sanitized horror, pull yourself together and stand. Your knees crack. You shuffle to the water basin, a trickle of cleanish water dribbling from a bronze spout. You rinse your hands. You don't trust it. You dry them on your tunic and immediately regret that too. Outside, the sun hits your face and you squint. You feel lighter, not cleaner, never cleaner, but emptier in every sense. You breathe in the city again, and somehow it smells better than the latrine. You rejoin the crowd, now part of the flow again. An invisible line has been crossed. Another ancient Roman ritual survived. A piece of your dignity left behind in the sewer. And yet, you're not alone. Everyone does it. Senators, slaves, soldiers, priests, prostitutes. The sponge is the great equalizer of Rome, a wet, bacteria-laden emblem of shared suffering. In a city of marble facades and social hierarchies, the latrine is democracy in its rawest, most intimate form. You adjust your belt, step over a puddle of questionable origin, and continue on. There's work to find, gods to ignore, sandals to wear through, and maybe, just maybe, a cup of Posca with fewer floaters than usual. But for now, you've survived the Roman toilet. And in this city, that counts as a victory. You've done your morning routine. You've suffered through breakfast, braved the streets, and survived the latrine. Now it's time for the true Roman experience, the part that breaks your body, your spirit, and occasionally your bones. Welcome to work. Not the kind with benefits or a lunch break, but the kind where you trade your lifespan for a handful of coins, if you're lucky. If you're not, you just collapse quietly in the dust, and someone else takes your place by the hour. Let's be clear, you are not important. You are not educated. You are not a merchant or a soldier or anything with a title that makes people nod respectfully. You're a plebeian, a nobody, a walking patch of grime wrapped in a threadbare tunic, whose entire purpose is to provide Rome with the manual labor it needs to keep pretending it's a civilization. And today, like most days, your job is simple: survive the shift. Maybe you're a porter. That means carrying amphory, bricks, sacks of grain, marble blocks, or whatever else someone richer than you doesn't want to lift. You don't have tools. You have your back, your knees, and a hemp rope that cuts into your flesh like a reminder of your place in the world. You squat. You lift. You stumble forward through dust, heat, and shouting. And the shouting never stops. Foremen, merchants, random passers-by. Everyone yells at you like it's a competitive sport. You're not even sure what they're saying half the time. Just words hurled like rocks at your ears. Or maybe you're digging, trenching out the foundations of another temple to a god who never listens. You swing a pickaxe made of iron that was already rusted when you inherited it. The soil is clay. The sun is merciless. And there's no shade except for the shadow of a tax collector's foot on your neck. You sweat until your tunic clings to your spine like a second, wetter skin. Blisters bloom on your hands like curses. You don't stop. If you stop, someone else gets your spot. If someone else gets your spot, you don't eat tonight. It's that simple. If you're particularly unlucky, you work in construction. Not the fancy marble stuff, no. You work on the scaffolding, hauling bricks up rickety wooden frames held together with spit and blind faith. No harness, no nets. One slip in your street art. You've seen it happen. Everyone has. You don't talk about it. You just keep climbing. The tools are blunt. The safety measures are fictional. The wages are a joke. Maybe you'll get a few asses, copper coins so dirty they smell like history. Maybe you'll get a stale roll of bread and a nod. Maybe you'll just get a kick and a warning to show up earlier tomorrow. If you even get to leave at all. The worst part? The repetition. It never changes. The same motions, the same pain, the same dirt under your nails, in your eyes, between your teeth. Your skin is stained brown from the sun. Your shoulders ache from years of effort that hasn't built anything you get to keep, and your feet are so callous they could be used as roofing material. You don't remember what it feels like to sit without groaning. Your body is a tool, and tools don't complain. Unless you're a woman. In which case, congratulations, you get all this and more. You grind grain, haul water, sew linen, cook, clean, rear children, and still manage to get blamed for everything. You work from dawn to dusk, and sometimes through the night. There are no shifts. There is no relief. You are the domestic engine of the empire, and you're tired in ways language cannot describe. If you're enslaved, work isn't just mandatory. It's permanent. Your day starts before sunrise and ends after your master's last belch. You clean, scrub, carry, cook, and perform every imaginable task from the humiliating to the horrifying. If you do it well, you survive. If you do it poorly, you get punished. There are no warnings, no days off. You belong to someone. Even your name isn't yours. At midday, when the sun hangs directly overhead like a divine punishment, you're allowed a brief pause. Not rest, just less motion. You crouch in the dirt. You drink from a shared skin of warm vinegar water. You eat a crust of something that may have once been bread. Someone nearby is coughing blood. Someone else is asleep sitting up. You stare at your hands. They don't look like your hands anymore. Just cracked things that hold tools. Then the bell rings, or the shout comes, or the whip cracks, or the overseer snarls, and you stand up again. Because that's what Rome demands. Endless motion, endless effort. A city built on columns and human spines. You pick up the same load. You walk the same route. You repeat the same gesture until your joints scream louder than your foreman. By sunset, your tunic is soaked, your legs tremble, and your back is a question mark. You've made enough to maybe eat tonight. Maybe. But you've also lost a little more cartilage, a little more hope, and one more coin flip against permanent injury. The streets are still loud. Life keeps moving. And tomorrow, it will all happen again. Because in ancient Rome, work isn't a career. It's just a slower kind of death. You've made it through the daylight, barely. Your back is ruined. Your knees are arguing with your spine, and your hands are trembling like leaves in a storm. But you're still breathing. And that means it's time for dinner, or what passes for it when you live in a one-room mold den with a ceiling that leaks every third thought and neighbors that sound like they're dying even when they're not. Dinner in ancient Rome is not a meal. It's a negotiation between hunger and scarcity, between your coins and what's left of the market, between what your stomach wants and what the flies haven't already claimed. You head to the local vendor before it gets dark, because in Rome, darkness is when the knives come out and the drunkards start peeing on doorposts. The stall is run by a man who smells like goat fat and has exactly 3 expressions: boredom, suspicion, and you're too poor for this. The options are limited. A handful of lentils that look like they've been rejected by every other buyer today. A wedge of cheese sweating through its cloth. A piece of dried fish that you suspect has been dried more by time than intention. You hand over a couple asses, small copper coins that barely qualify as money, and he tosses you a scoop of beans and something that might be a date or might be a larva. You don't ask. You can't afford answers. Back in your apartment, you prepare your meal. You share it, of course, with your roommates, with a neighbor who traded you half an onion for access to your fire, and with a cat who's developed the arrogant habit of stealing food directly from your hand. You sit on the floor, back against the wall, bowl in hand, flies orbiting you like you're the center of their private galaxy. The food is bland. If you're lucky, it's only bland. If you're unlucky, it's actively plotting against your intestines. The lentils are hard. The fish is mostly bone. The onion is a luxury, sharp, pungent, and enough to make you feel something. You chew slowly, mostly because your teeth hurt. You've ground so much grit into them over the years, from sand in your bread, dust in your water, ash in the air, that they're worn down like old paving stones. You've got 2 that wiggle when you chew. You've named them and pray they survive the week. You wash it down with Posca again, sour vinegar water that you've accepted as your lot in life. You sip it carefully, pretending the bitterness is refreshing. It isn't. It tastes like old armor and regret, but safer than the Tiber. Everything is safer than the Tiber. And now, as the oil lamp flickers and the city outside starts to sing its nightly chorus of shouting, fighting, vomiting, and flute playing, you start to feel it. The ache, not just in your body. That's constant. But the one in your chest, the slow, creeping awareness that you're sick. Not dramatically, not deathbed material yet, but something's wrong. Your stomach grumbles in ways that don't feel natural. Your joints burn even when you're not moving. There's a sore under your arm that hasn't gone away. You have a cough, just a small one, but dry, stubborn, and unwelcome. You look around and realize everyone else is coughing too. The child in the corner has a fever. The old man upstairs hasn't come down in 2 days. You hear someone puking outside and realize you're not sure if they ever stopped from last night. Disease in Rome is like smoke, always present, sometimes choking. There are no doctors. Not for you. There are healers, sure. Women with bundles of herbs and opinions. Men with sharp knives and dirty hands. But unless you've got coin or divine favor, you're better off praying to Asclepius and hoping he's in a good mood. Spoiler, he never is. You lie down on your straw mattress. It pokes you in 17 places at once. You shift. You regret shifting. The straw is damp. The blanket smells like mildew and old sweat, and your feet stick out over the edge into open rat territory. You wrap yourself up anyway, because this is the best part of your day. You're off your feet. You're not working. You're not eating. You're just still. You whisper a prayer, not loud enough to draw attention. The gods are fickle and vengeful, and you'd rather not remind them you exist. You ask them to keep the fever away, to keep the roof from collapsing, to let your teeth last another week. You don't ask for much. You know better. Outside, Rome hums with chaos. A cart tips over. A man sings an obscene song. A woman shouts about stolen wine. Somewhere, a dog howls. Somewhere else, something breaks. The wind carries in the scent of fire, piss, incense, and roasted chickpeas. You breathe it in. You close your eyes. You don't sleep. You rest with your guard up and one hand on your coin pouch. Because in ancient Rome, peace isn't peace. It's just a brief pause between disasters. Morning breaks like a slap. Not gentle sunlight streaming through gauze curtains, but a full-on auditory assault. Shouting vendors, clanging pots, a goat having what sounds like an existential crisis, and someone 2 floors up vomiting over the edge of a balcony with the force and precision of a hydraulic siege engine. You haven't really slept. You just went unconscious for a few hours and woke up covered in cat fur, your right arm asleep, and your left eye crusted shut. The child beside you has wet the bedding. Again, the straw smells like regret, sour milk, and something that might be human or rodent, depending on your optimism. But today is not just any day. Today, you're not working. Today is a public festival day. One of the many strategically placed holy days the empire scatters throughout the calendar like breadcrumbs for the starving. And if you've been smart or lucky, you've managed to avoid being conscripted into some extra temple cleaning or street sweeping duty. No, today is yours. To rest, to reflect, to distract yourself from your cracked feet and your neighbor's bedbugs. And how do Romans rest? They scream at blood. The day begins with religion, because in Rome, bloodlust and piety often hold hands. You make your way toward the temple district, not because you're devout. The gods lost your loyalty somewhere around your 3rd bout of lice, but because public festivals begin with sacrifice, and sacrifice means free food. You follow the crowd, a slow-moving tide of sweating humanity, all heading in the same direction, muttering oaths, adjusting tunics, picking scabs, and dodging fresh piles of manure. The temple is enormous, majestic, carved pillars, grand staircases, gilded doors, a palace for gods who have never once had to eat burnt lentils. Inside, priests are already busy preparing the animals. Goats, pigs, even an ox if the Senate has been feeling performative this week. The crowd gathers. You push in. Elbows jab you in the ribs. A man behind you sneezes on your neck. You don't turn around. You've learned. The air is thick with incense, sweat, and anticipation. A trumpet blares. The priest raises his arms. A prayer begins, halfway between song and speech, invoking Jupiter, Mars, Venus, and whichever other divine bureaucrats are responsible for rain, crops, and not dying of dysentery. Then comes the sacrifice. The knife is swift. The blood pours. Some cheer. Some wince. Some, the hungry, lick their lips. The entrails are examined for omens. The liver says, maybe. The priest nods like he understands what that means. You don't care. You're watching the attendants haul off the meat. If you're fast, if you know a guy, if you're willing to fight a child, or elbow an old woman in the ribs, you might get a scrap. You try. You don't succeed. The meat is gone before you blink, into the hands of local officials, temple servants, and one toothless man who always seems to be first in line no matter where the line is. But the gods have been honored, the crowd has been stirred, and now it's time for Rome's true religion, spectacle. You make your way toward the arena. Not the Colosseum. That's for the real holidays and the real deaths. But a smaller venue, one of many scattered across the city like sacred sores. The seats are stone. The shade is minimal. The noise is incredible. You squeeze in between two strangers. One smells like onions, the other like fear. Below, the sand is being raked. Blood from the last event hasn't dried yet. You recognize the iron tang immediately. So does your stomach. You're not sure if it's hunger or nausea. Might be both. The games begin. First up, animal fights. A bear versus dogs. A wild boar turned loose among a ring of archers. A leopard, half mad from hunger and confinement, charges a man in armor made entirely of bad decisions. The crowd roars. Bets are made. Coins clink. You don't bet. You've only got 2 copper pieces and a louse infestation you could maybe sell if there were a market for misery. Then come the condemned. Criminals, rebels, debtors, paraded into the arena like meat with legs. Some are forced to fight each other with dull blades, prolonging the agony. Others are tied to posts and left for wild animals. One man runs. The crowd laughs. He's caught. The laughter turns to cheers. You cheer too. You don't know why. You don't want to. But something in the crowd takes you over. A wave of brutality dressed in tradition. You lose yourself in it. And that terrifies you. Then the gladiators. Now the noise hits a new pitch. These are the stars. The broken-toothed, scarred, beautiful monsters of Rome. Some are cheered by name. Others are booed. You watch them enter, oiled, armored, and already bleeding from old wounds. They circle. They size each other up. The fight begins. It's not elegant. It's desperate, gritty, real. Bones snap. Flesh tears. Dust rises in clouds. One man falls. The other hesitates, then finishes the job. The crowd screams approval. You join in. You can't help it. You sit there for hours, baking in the sun, watching blood paint the sand, clapping until your hands sting, shouting until your throat burns. The violence numbs you. The spectacle devours you. You feel strangely alive and deeply ashamed. By the end of the day, you're hoarse, exhausted, and slightly sunburned. You haven't eaten. Your ears ring. Your clothes smell like iron and armpit. But you're distracted. And in Rome, distraction is the closest thing to peace. You walk home slowly, passing beggars, broken sandals, drunk men weeping into amphory. The gods have been honored. The crowd has been fed. The dead are being dragged off stage. And tomorrow? Tomorrow, you'll go back to hauling bricks or carrying water or begging for work. But tonight, you've seen something bigger than you. More brutal, more honest. You've seen Rome's real soul, and it's covered in blood. The next day begins with a choice. Not an easy one. Not one you're really entitled to make, but a choice nonetheless. Do you endure another layer of crust, stench, and invisible parasites? Or do you subject your body and soul to the great Roman tradition of communal bathing, a practice that promises cleanliness but delivers something far more ambiguous? You haven't bathed in? Well, time is a blur when your skin itches constantly and your tunic smells like boiled rat wool. So today you gather your things, a dull strigil, a pot of cheap olive oil, your most socially acceptable tunic, and a single copper coin, and set off for the nearest thermi, Rome's answer to hygiene, leisure, and disease transmission all in one. The bathhouse is impossible to miss. Massive arches, thick columns, echoing laughter, and steam. Always the steam, rising in wisps like the souls of poor men trying to escape the smell. You join the line out front, oppressive bodies waiting for admission, already sweating in anticipation of sweating more. The man in front of you is barefoot. The man behind you is burping something that smells like sour onions. A child tugs at your belt and tries to steal your coin. You slap his hand. He shrugs. You nod in mutual respect. When you finally reach the entrance, you hand your coin to the Ostiarius, the doorman, who doesn't even glance at you. You pass through the vestibule and into the apoditerium, the changing room, where dignity comes to die. Dozens of men, of every rank and size and odor, stripped down without hesitation. Fat senators with bellies like amphory, lean slaves covered in whip scars, soldiers still caked in battlefield grime. No one is modest. There is no room for modesty. You disrobe carefully, folding your tunic and tucking your pouch into your sandal, praying to Mercury that no one notices. You're not important enough for a locker slave, so you hide your belongings in a crevice in the wall and pretend it's safe. Now you're naked, fully, utterly, and it is not the elegant kind of nudity. It's functional, sagging, scratched, bruised. Your skin is a map of everything that's gone wrong in your life. You clutch your strigil like it's a weapon and follow the flow of bodies into the tepidarium, the warm room, where the air is thick and wet, like breathing through a used sponge. Sweat forms instantly, rolling down your chest, pooling in uncomfortable places. The floor is slippery, and someone has spilled oil again. You shuffle along like an old goat, avoiding a cliff. The smell is indescribable. Steam, yes, but layered over it. Armpits, old feet, unwashed hair, and something sharp and sour like fermented sausage. You sit on a bench slick with sweat and condensation, elbow to elbow with strangers who all pretend not to be looking at each other's everything. A man next to you starts rubbing himself down with a perfumed oil that smells aggressively like crushed flowers and desperation. Another sneezes on the back of your neck. You consider death as an alternative to hygiene. Eventually, you're herded into the caldarium, the hot room, a space so sweltering it feels like a punishment. The air scalds your lungs. Your skin prickles and burns. The floor could fry fish. You sit on a marble ledge and try not to pass out. A slave pours water onto the heated stones, and the room hisses like an angry deity. Everyone is slick, red-faced, dripping. A man across from you begins reciting poetry. Someone farts. No one acknowledges it. It's time for the scraping. You coat yourself in oil, then use your strigil to drag the fill from your skin in long, slow strokes. Oil, dirt, dead skin, and whatever else has been living on you. It all collects in dark, greasy ribbons. You scrape your chest, your arms, your legs, your back as best you can. You feel cleaner and somehow more contaminated all at once. There are no towels. You wipe yourself with your hands, flicking off the residue like a lizard shedding shame. Then, if you survive, you move to the frigidarium, the cold plunge. The shock is immediate. Your skin tightens, your breath stops, your soul briefly considers leaving your body. But it's the only moment in the entire process that feels vaguely like cleanliness. The water is cold, yes, but it numbs everything: pain, thought, the memory of who you are. You dunk your head, come up gasping, and realize you're still alive. Barely. Afterward, you return to the apoditerium. Your tunic is damp from the steam in the walls. Your pouch is still there, miraculously. You dry yourself with the corner of your garment, which does absolutely nothing, and put your clothes back on over damp skin. The result is an instant return to discomfort, but you do feel less itchy, less heavy, less coated in despair. On your way out, you pass the others, lounging in the sun, playing dice, arguing about politics, discussing gladiators like wine critics. The bathhouse is not just for bathing. It's for business, gossip, seduction, scheming, and pretending you're not living in a disease-ridden tenement. It's Rome's great equalizer: naked, sweating, swearing, scraping. You walk back through the steam and the sun, still damp, still sore, but temporarily cleansed. Not purified, not healed, just flushed, peeled, re-oiled. You will still stink by nightfall. Your tunic will still glue itself to your back. Your feet will still be caked with grime. But for one glorious hour, you shared in the illusion that cleanliness was possible. And in this empire of dust, blood, and sweat, that counts as luxury. By the time you leave the baths, the sun is high overhead, merciless and uncaring. The golden, blistering eye of Apollo watching the world burn for his amusement. Your skin is half-cooked from the caldarium, Your tunic sticks to you like a damp shroud, and your stomach, which had briefly quieted during your steamy brush with false hygiene, has found its voice again. And it is not whispering, it is screaming, the kind of deep, hollow, almost spiritual hunger that makes your hands tremble and your knees go soft. It's midday in Rome, or a sexta, and everyone is out hunting food like jackals in linen. The streets are a pulsing, chaotic artery of humanity, carts, animals, and noise. You head toward the Forum Holatorium, the vegetable market, though it might as well be called the Forum of Disappointment for what's usually available by this hour. The best goods are long gone, snapped up by early risers, house slaves, and clever vendors who trade in whispers and side glances. What remains is bruised, limp, and vaguely insect-infested. You dodge a mule cart spilling fish juice as it turns. The driver doesn't slow down. You get splashed and don't bother reacting. You're used to being wet with things you didn't consent to. You elbow past a man shouting about garum, fermented fish sauce, his breath proving that he lives by the product. Another vendor is yelling about radishes, which look like they've already been chewed once. A child runs past with a stolen fig in each hand, pursued by a vendor with a broom and the agility of a drunk tortoise. You nearly trip over a beggar with no legs, dragging himself across the flagstones with one sandal tied to his knee and a cup in his teeth. Then you see it, the line, stretching like a hungry snake around the grain distribution point, the Annona. Rome, great and generous, gives out free grain to registered citizens. Fermentatio, the lifeline of the poor. You, tragically, are registered. You made the deadline by 3 days and a forged reference from a neighbor's cousin who once washed a senator's tunic. So you join the line. It moves at the speed of rot. The sun bears down. The old woman ahead of you wheezes. The man behind you picks his teeth with a chicken bone and mutters obscenities at the clouds. You wait and wait. A fight breaks out further down. 2 men arguing about place in line. A guard steps in, wooden staff first, questions never. Someone gets pushed into a cart of rotten turnips. The smell intensifies. No one leaves. The grain is life. The grain is hope. You finally reach the front, present your token, and are handed your allotment. A sack of raw wheat, heavy, itchy, and somehow already dusty. It's not a meal. It's a promise of a future meal. If you have access to a mill or a friend with strong teeth. You shuffle away, half blind from sun glare and the general stupidity of the system. There's a baker nearby, his face red from heat and shouting. He's selling panis plebeius, the bread of the people, coarse, black, hard as regret. You trade half your grain for a loaf and cradle it like a newborn. It's dense, slightly burnt, and smells like a mixture of charcoal, yeast, and old sandals. You sit on the edge of a fountain that may or may not be sacred, tear into the bread with your teeth, and chew until your jaw goes numb. Lunch in Rome isn't a feast. It's survival. It's eating just enough to not faint during your next round of labor. You wash it down with a sip of your ever-present vinegar water. Pasca, still warm, still awful. You tear another hunk off the loaf, ignoring the grit in the crust and the 2 teeth that wiggle dangerously as you chew. You pick a weevil out of the center. Consider it. Eat around it. Around you, the square is alive with the theater of Roman poverty. A blind man is singing a hymn to Diana while shaking a bowl of coins that sounds suspiciously empty. A woman with 4 children screams at a fruit vendor over a peach she claims was moldy. The vendor yells back that her children are moldy. A chicken escapes from somewhere and flaps across the square like a feathered omen of doom. No one catches it. It disappears into an alley. Lucky chicken. You move on, not because you're done eating, but because staying in one place too long invites conversation, pickpocketing, or both. You still have half a loaf, wrapped in cloth and hidden beneath your tunic. You walk along the shaded side of the street. What little shade there is, past painted walls covered in crude graffiti. Someone has drawn a phallus and named it Julius. You snort. Humor still lives here, even if hygiene doesn't. Lunch is over. Your stomach is full in the same way a whisper fills a room. It's not enough. It never is. But you have food in you, and that gives you the energy to keep moving. Back to the street. Back to the labor. Back to the aching limbs, the boiling heat, and the ever-hungry city. You pass another beggar, this one younger, eyes sunken, tunic in shreds. You throw him the heel of your bread. He doesn't thank you. He just eats it. You don't need thanks. You need luck, because in Rome, food is never guaranteed. Only hunger is. Afternoon in Rome brings no rest. The city does not slow, it simmers. The sun begins its slow retreat down the western sky, but the heat lingers like a scolding. The stones beneath your sandals radiate warmth like the belly of a sleeping beast, and the air is thick with dust, sweat, and incense. You have no shift to work this afternoon. A rare miracle, perhaps, or a scheduling failure that benefits you. Either way, you decide to pay your respects. Not to your landlord or your employer, to the only figures more temperamental and less accountable, the gods. Religion in Rome is not a private affair. It's not a personal moment of faith or quiet meditation. It's business. It's politics. It's theater. You don't believe the gods love you. In fact, you're fairly certain they don't even like you. But you acknowledge them because to not do so is to tempt fate in a city where fate has a dagger and no sense of humor. So you walk toward the temple district, weaving through crowds, past doorways shaded with worn linen, past wells surrounded by gossiping women, past altars blackened by offerings and spilled hopes. The Forum is the beating heart of Roman public life, and religion is stitched into every artery. Statues stare at you from every angle. Stern-faced Jupiter with his thunderbolt and beard of authority. Graceful Minerva, forever wise and forever watching. Mars, oiled and smug, as if he personally invented blood. You pass smaller shrines too. Local gods, house spirits, ancestors etched into chipped stones, altars littered with stale bread and dried figs. Withered garlands that once dripped flowers, but now just reek of mildew and pigeon shit. It is not beautiful. It is alive. Your first stop is the Temple of Fortuna, the only deity you've ever whispered to sincerely. Lady Luck, goddess of chances, of dice rolls, of turning tides. You owe her more than you can say. You light a tiny bit of incense, old and bitter, and mutter a request under your breath. Something simple. Don't let the roof cave in. Let my toothache pass. Let me wake up tomorrow with the same number of limbs I had today. Modest prayers. Reasonable ones. She doesn't answer. She never does. But you leave the offering anyway, just in case. Then you follow the trail of humanity toward the real gathering. Not of saints or senators, but of spectators. There's a street preacher shouting under a fig tree, waving his arms like he's swatting invisible bees. He speaks of Cybele, the great mother, and warns of impure souls, of famine, of fire. The crowd watches politely, then throws half-rotten vegetables when he starts spitting. He doesn't stop. Madness and faith live side by side in Rome, and sometimes it's hard to tell which is which. Nearby, women are selling charms, little carved figurines, phallic amulets, bones wrapped in red thread. They swear these trinkets protect against curses, sickness, infertility, betrayal, and bad breath. One promises that hers will prevent spontaneous combustion, a new concern you hadn't considered until now. You buy one anyway, a carved wooden eye painted with soot and spit. You tie it to your belt and hope it doesn't attract worse luck. Rumors swirl like smoke here, passed hand to hand faster than bread. You overhear them constantly, between merchants, between bathers, between two prostitutes arguing over territory. They say the emperor was poisoned. They say a senator's wife ran off with a gladiator. They say the aqueduct has rats in it. They say the baker down the street sold a loaf that screamed when cut open. No one knows what's true. No one cares. Gossip in Rome is more nourishing than food and twice as spicy. You don't correct it. You don't question it. You pass it on. You approach a small shrine near crossroads. The Laras, household spirits of the dead. People leave bits of meat here, broken tiles, dyed thread, even teeth. You kneel, leave a sliver of your bread crust, and whisper a name. Someone you once loved, or tried to, or meant to. It doesn't matter if they hear. The act itself is a kind of stitching, a desperate attempt to hold your threadbare life together. As you rise, a priest brushes past you, perfumed, powdered, pink-cheeked, holding a scroll and a goat's horn. He does not look at you. He has never looked at you. He serves the gods, yes, but only the ones whose temples have columns and donors. You serve the real ones. Hunger, chance time. You serve them every day with your body. Evening descends slowly, as if the gods are reluctant to hand the city back to the mortals. The sun filters through columns, painting the plaza gold. You wander homeward, past burning oil lamps and singing children, past doorways where lovers argue in hushed tones and cats curl atop broken amphorae. You're still hungry. You're always hungry, but your soul feels less heavy. Just a bit. You didn't find a miracle, but you found a moment, a breath, a pause, a glance from a statue that didn't feel like disdain. And sometimes, in a city where the divine and the disease share sidewalks, that's all the blessing you can afford, and all the blessing you'll get. Evening in Rome does not arrive quietly. There's no soft wind, no peace, no sigh from the city as the day gives way to night. It arrives like everything else in this city, loudly, with friction, smoke, and complaint. The sun has dipped behind the tiled rooftops. The shadows have grown long, and the light that remains filters through alleys and broken shutters like watery soup ladled through a cracked bowl. You are on your way home, not because you're done for the day, but because there is nowhere else to go. Because the streets will soon be ruled by a different Rome. Thieves, fire, pestilence, and men drunk enough to kill their own shadows. Your building is still standing. That's a small victory. You glance upward at the scorched plaster, the cracked timbers, the leaning geometry that defies both architecture and gravity. Someone has lit a lamp outside the stairwell. The flame wobbles inside a jar of old fish oil and burned linen. You ascend carefully, avoiding the weak spots in the steps, of which there are many. You pass your neighbor's door, open, as always, revealing the interior. 5 people, 2 goats, and 1 sack of turnips fighting for space on a floor that was never clean, even a myth. Inside your own unit, the air is immediately warmer, more sour. The smell of sweat, damp straw, stale food, and the kind of foot odor that haunts dreams. You hang your tunic by the wall, a nail barely holding on a crumbling plaster, and step carefully over the sleeping child, the broken pot, and the slumped figure of your cousin who may or may not have been drunk since noon. A small fire burns in a clay brazier in the corner, surrounded by 3 stones, a heap of ash, and an expression of despair. The heat it gives off is minimal. The smoke, however, is ambitious. There is no ventilation. There never was. The smoke curls upward, meets the ceiling, then changes its mind and comes back down. You wave it away, cough, and sit beside it anyway. It is ritual now, not comfort. Around the room, others gather. You know them, some by name, some just by the sounds they make at night. There is no privacy. There is only proximity. You don't speak at first. No one does. The body arrives before the voice. You sit together in the semi-darkness, chewing on scraps, scratching itches, staring into the fire like it might remember something you forgot. And then someone tells a story. It begins quietly, a tale from a distant town, or the repetition of a dream, or a lie so familiar it's become sacred. Someone speaks of a man who found gold in the sewer. Someone else swears they saw a senator naked at the baths, crying like a child. The stories pile up like bricks, rough, uneven, vital. This is the Roman hearth, not built from marble, but from memory, bitterness, and shared delusion. You listen. You nod. You laugh when required. And slowly, the tension bleeds from your spine. There is no warmth in the room, not really. But there is something close. There is breath and voice and other people who are equally broken. You pass a cup, sour wine, or pasca, or something worse. You drink. You grimace. You drink again. Children squabble. An old woman hums. A rat scuttles in the rafters above. No one moves. The rat lives here too. You've named him. He keeps his distance. Someone cooks, if it can be called that. A pot hangs over the coals, filled with lentils, onions, and whatever could be scavenged from the market gutters. The steam smells like honesty and poverty. You get a ladleful. It burns your tongue and tastes of salt, smoke, and effort. You eat it all, scraping the bottom of the bowl with your fingers, then licking those fingers like it matters. Because it does. A baby begins to cry. Its mother rocks it. Someone farts. Everyone pretends not to notice. These are the sacred rules of the insula. You do not judge. You do not react. You allow the body to exist, even in all its failure and noise. Then come the songs. Not elegant arias, but the low, humming grunts of people who forgot melody long ago. Or chants, crude hymns, nursery rhymes from the countryside where you were born but haven't seen in 15 years. You join in. You don't know the words. You mouth the shape of belonging. And in this moment, you realize something awful and wonderful. This is home. Not because it's safe, not because it's warm, but because it's full of other people who hurt in the same ways you do. You've all lived through the same fires, shivered through the same plagues, lost teeth to the same bread. You're a chorus of cracked voices and burned fingers. You are Rome's foundation, whether it admits it or not. Outside, the wind rises. Somewhere, someone screams. A dog barks. A drunk sings. A building collapses in the distance. You hear it. You do not get up. Instead, you lean back against the wall, let the fire warm one side of your face, and let the smoke sting your eyes. You wrap a cloak around your shoulders. Someone snores. The baby has stopped crying. You are still here. And in Rome, that means everything. The fire has burned down to embers. The songs have turned to murmurs. Most of your neighbors are asleep, curled against one another like discarded laundry. But you're still awake. Something gnaws at you. Hunger, maybe. Restlessness, more likely. There's no work tomorrow, no obligations, but survival. And after a day spent scraping yourself raw for grain and gods, your mind needs something else. Something loose. Something dangerous. So you rise, tug on your sandals, grab your cloak, the one that still smells like river mold and hope, and step out into the Roman night. The streets are different now. They breathe slower. They whisper instead of shout. You walk carefully, sticking to the shadows, avoiding puddles, not because you fear water, but because in Rome, puddles bite. The sky is dark, cloudless, heavy. The air tastes of metal, smoke, and roasted chickpeas. You hear footsteps, then silence, then more footsteps. You don't turn around. You learn that the hard way. Rome at night is not about eye contact. It's about angles, exits, and not smelling like coin. You pass a group of boys gambling by torchlight, their faces streaked with soot and victory. They're playing knucklebones, laughing like hyenas on festival wine. One of them shouts in your direction. Something crude, something brave. You ignore it. You were him once. You might be him again. The game goes on. You walk. Further down, you hear music, if it can be called that, drifting from an alley tavern so cramped the door opens into a wall. Inside, oil lamps flicker, whores lean on tables, and soldiers drink like the war never ended. The floor is slick with wine and what might be blood. A man sings about Jupiter's genitals. No one laughs. It's an old song. You step in just long enough to inhale the scent of burnt lamb and human closeness, then step back out. Temptation comes cheap in Rome. Survival does not. You head downhill toward the Subura, the belly of the city. Here, the rules are different. The law doesn't come here. Not the real one. The vigiles, Rome's fire watch and half-hearted peacekeepers patrol with torches and clubs, but they know better than to interfere. Down here, the city polices itself with knives, whispers, and a shared understanding that screaming draws attention and attention gets people killed. In one doorway, two men argue. One accuses the other of stealing his sandals. The other replies that they were never his to begin with. A punch is thrown, then another. The first man collapses. The second checks his pockets. You keep walking. It's not your story. There are dice games on the corners. Prostitutes with painted eyes lean from balconies and beckon in 5 different languages. A man with a monkey is dancing for coins, though the monkey looks like it's reconsidering the partnership. You pass a food stall still open, roasted nuts, questionable meat, wine that's more vinegar than virtue. You buy a handful of warm chestnuts. The vendor doesn't speak, just nods and grunts. His teeth are gone. His fingers are stained. You don't ask with what. In the torchlight, graffiti glimmers. Carvings scratched into the plaster. Curses, declarations, crude jokes, promises of pleasure. Someone has drawn the emperor's face and replaced his mouth with a goat's ass. It's surprisingly well done. You smile. Briefly. Suddenly a shout. Not far off. A woman screaming. Not in anger. In fear. Then the sound of running. You freeze. That scream was real. It cuts through the wine haze and oil, smoke like a blade. You duck into a doorway and listen. The running fades. The scream doesn't return. You exhale. Then you see the vigiles, 3 of them, walking slowly, torches raised. They glance down the alley. They see you. You lower your eyes. They move on. You're not worth stopping tonight. You're dressed too poor to rob, too awake to beat, too sober to find. You live in the cracks. That's your protection. Eventually, you loop back toward your block. The streets narrow again. The rats are bolder now. One scurries between your feet with a squeak like a broken hinge. You see a man sleeping under a cart, covered in rags and dreams. You recognize him. You shared bread last week. He doesn't move. You don't check. You keep walking. Your insula is still standing. You thank no one. Gratitude is dangerous here. You climb the stairs, each step groaning like it's about to confess something. You slip inside. The fire has died. The room is a landscape of breathing shapes and muffled coughs. You find your spot, lay down, pull your cloak over your chest, and close your eyes. You're not dead. You still have your bread, your sandals, and the coin you didn't spend. You saw the city's underbelly tonight and didn't join it. That's a kind of triumph. Tomorrow, the sun will rise again. The dust will rise with it. The hammer of Rome will strike another day into your bones. But tonight, for now, you're just one more shadow in a city of 10 million size. And that's enough. There's no sunrise in your room. There's light, yes, a gray, hesitant light that seeps through a torn scrap of linen tacked over a hole someone once called a window. But it isn't triumphant. It's not golden or warm. It's the kind of light that doesn't promise a new day. It confirms that yesterday never really ended. It's morning again in Rome, and your body knows before your eyes do. Your joints wake up before your thoughts. Your back throbs in 5 places. Your hip is numb. Your knee won't straighten properly. You slept curled around yourself like a half-boiled insect, twisted by the uneven straw and the invisible crawl of lice. You try to stretch and hear a pop. Maybe it's a tendon. Maybe it's your soul detaching. Someone nearby is snoring. Someone else is already up, whispering prayers or curses or both. You feel the warmth of another body next to you, a child, maybe, or the cat. Possibly both. You blink. The ceiling is cracked and dark with soot, spider webs, and the stains of 1,000 fires that didn't kill you. You sit up, slowly. Your tunic sticks to your back, damp from sweat or humidity or shared breath. You scratch the inside of your arm and come away with something that wriggles. You flick it into the straw and whisper a small apology to no one. Your mouth is dry. Your tongue a piece of felt glued to the roof of your skull. You search for your water skin. Empty. Of course. You lift it anyway, hoping some ancient Roman miracle has occurred. It hasn't. You chew the inside of your cheek and consider whether today's first act of bravery will be leaving this bedroll or simply pretending your bladder isn't about to revolt. Eventually, you stand. Your legs protest. Your head swims. You steady yourself on the wall, palm against plaster that flakes like burnt parchment. Someone outside is already shouting. A woman screeching about stolen bread. A dog barking like it owns the street. A baby crying the universal song of the underfed. You shuffle toward the pot in the corner, the one used for the night's deposits. It's full, not overflowing, but close. You look at it. It looks back. You sigh, pick it up, brace yourself, and open the door. The stairwell stinks worse in the morning than it does at night. The combination of human waste, spilled wine, damp mold, and burned fish scales from the shop downstairs creates a bouquet that hits your face like a slap from Neptune's armpit. You descend carefully, not just for your nose, but because the stairs are slick. Piss, oil, condensation, does it matter? You reach the bottom, duck outside, and toss the contents of the pot into the alley with a practiced flick of the wrist. You mumble cave, out of habit, though no one listens anymore. The splash echoes against stone. Somewhere, someone curses you. Someone else laughs. You return upstairs, pot in hand, feeling emptier, slightly lighter, but in no way better. Then comes the ritual. You reach for food. There is none. Not unless you count 2 withered olives in a bowl with a dead fly floating on the surface. You stare at them, briefly imagining they're grapes or cheese or a roast duck. You eat one. You chew slowly. It tastes like vinegar and self-pity. The second you save. You're not sure why. Hope, maybe. Your neighbor knocks. 3 short raps. You open the door and exchange no words. He hands you a tiny crust of bread. You give him half of your second olive. The exchange is ritualistic. Sacred. Not for nourishment, but to remind yourselves that you're still human. You piss in the corner. You rub your teeth with ash. You splash your face with water that smells faintly of bronze and old buckets. You pull on your tunic, stiff from yesterday's sweat, and tie your sandals, which are now more whole than leather. Then, at last, you open the door again and step into the day. The street greets you like a punch. Heat already rising from the stone, noise ricocheting between walls, smells so complex and invasive they could be considered sentient. The sun isn't kind. It's a spotlight, and you are a bug beneath it. Children run past barefoot. A merchant is setting up his stall, shouting prices before he's even unpacked his goods. A goat tied to a post sneezes violently. A priest walks by with a chicken under one arm and a smug expression, as if the gods have confided in him something especially cruel. You move toward the fountain. You need water. Again, you always need water. The line is already forming. A woman with 3 children clutches her jug like a shield. A man without shoes pushes to the front. Someone else threatens to punch him. The fountain itself gurgles, not invitingly, but like it resents being used. You feel your skin halfway before being elbowed aside. Back home, the baby's crying again. Your cousin is vomiting into a bucket. Your neighbor's door slams. She's already late for her work at the laundry pits. You look down at your hands. They're cracked, blistered, shaking. You clench them into fists and release them. You have work today. Probably. Maybe. You'll find out when you get there. If there is no work, there will be walking. If there is no food, there will be theft. If there is no mercy, there will be repetition. This is Rome. It demands your body. Every hour, every step, every breath. You tighten the rope around your waist. You step into the flow of people. You begin. Again. You don't go to the forum to find anything. You go to see it, to hear it, to let it flow over you like a flood of voices, sweat, and delusion. You go the way you go to a public bath. Not because it's pleasant, but because not going leaves you filthier than the experience itself. In the forum, everything happens at once. Markets, speeches, crimes, miracles, betrayal, laughter, execution. It's a stew of humanity left boiling too long. The scum rises, the meat floats, and you, unfortunately, are the broth. You leave your insula with your expectations low and your head down. It's mid-morning and the sun is already flexing its muscle over the rooftops, turning the stone streets into a tiled frying pan. Your sandals slap against the pavement, one strap loose, the other suspiciously moist, and you try not to think about the source. The Forum is far enough to be a walk, close enough to make you question why you bothered. Along the way, you pass the usual mess. A man urinating into a gutter with the focus of a scholar. A woman slapping her son with a loaf of bread. A fruit vendor asleep at his stall, his figs being devoured by wasps and the poor alike. The smell is aggressive. Goat, garlic, incense, and humanity. You breathe through your mouth and immediately regret it. You're not here to eat. You're not here to pray. You're here to remember why nothing in Rome makes sense and why no one dares stop pretending it does. The Forum opens before you like a wound. Massive, churning, magnificent. Columns stretch skyward, chipped and soot-streaked, as if reaching for gods who left centuries ago. Statues stand in poses of eternal dignity, arms raised, chins lifted, eyes carved with impossible certainty, all surrounded by beggars, flies, and pigeon droppings. The marble glows white in the sun, but everything else is the color of sweat, brown, gray, yellow, and the green of early stage rot. You plunge in. Immediately, you're caught in the current. A boy runs past screaming something about fresh eggs. A man selling grapes shoves a bowl in your face. A woman grabs your arm and tries to sell you an amulet shaped like a phallus. You shake her off, not because you don't need protection, you just can't afford it. She curses you in a dialect that predates Latin. You move on. You pass a line of prostitutes leaning against a temple wall. Not vestals, not temple dancers, just working women in tunics dyed too bright to be honest. One winks, another spits, a third argues with a client about price versus performance. No one looks shocked. This is Rome. Hypocrisy is a virtue, and business is sacred. At the center, near the rostra, a man is screaming at a crowd. He's wearing a clean toga, which means either he's wealthy or recently stole one, and gesturing as if warding off demons. The Republic is dying, he bellows. The grain ships are late. The eastern provinces are corrupt. The gods are watching. You nod. The Republic has been dying since it was born. The grain ships are always late. The East is always corrupt. And the gods, if they're watching, have already sold their shares and moved to a quieter province. No one listens. Everyone hears. A group of philosophers has taken over a corner bench. One is reciting Homer with the kind of emotion usually reserved for violent accidents. Another is asking passers-by if anything can be truly known. A third is clearly asleep with his eyes open, swaying like seaweed. You hover nearby, pretending to be interested. You nod thoughtfully. You hope someone drops a coin. They don't. The Forum stinks of roasted chickpeas and fresh lies. A baker is swearing that his bread is blessed by Ceres. A fishmonger claims his eels come from the Nile, though they're clearly gasping in a barrel of Tiber sludge. A charlatan with oily hair waves a scroll, promising eternal youth for the price of your last dignity. You decline politely. He offers you a sample. You run. Then you reach the Senate steps. The real theater. A knot of patricians stands in the shade, their faces polished and powdered, togas creased into submission. They talk in low, fat voices about taxes, roads, war, things you will feel but never touch. One laughs. Another adjusts his ring. They smell of perfume, not people. You try to remember if you've ever seen one bleed. You rest near the temple of Castor and Pollux, finding a patch of cracked stone not currently occupied by a goat, a beggar, or a senator's urine. You sit. You watch. You listen. Someone gets caught stealing. A vendor shrieks. The thief runs. He's fast. The crowd parts. A soldier gives chase, armor clanking, curses flying. The thief darts left, then right, then vanishes. The vendor mutters a prayer. The soldier gives up. The crowd returns to normal. Just another heartbeat in Rome's great cardiac arrest. You pull out the last of your bread, hard enough to be considered a weapon in most provinces, and gnaw on the corner. It tastes like yesterday, which is better than it smelling like tomorrow. Around you, the city keeps singing, loudly, badly, and with conviction. A street poet begins reciting love verses to an audience of drunks. A toothless vendor beats a rhythm on a broken amphora. A boy offers to shine your sandals with spit and optimism. A man collapses near a pillar and begins snoring. No one checks if he's dead. If he is, someone will take his sandals. If he's not, someone will take his sandals anyway. You stay longer than you meant to. You always do, because the forum doesn't care who you are, which is oddly comforting. It treats the liar and the philosopher, the thief and the magistrate, the rat and the baker exactly the same. Like noise, like compost, like content. Eventually, you rise. You brush the dust from your knees. Your legs ache. Your back tightens. You push into the crowd again, back into the steam. The crush, the heat of 20,000 bodies, all pretending the gods are impressed. And Rome, vast and hungry and utterly oblivious, opens her mouth and swallows you whole. Again, you've worked, you've begged, you've eaten crusts hard enough to chip pottery. The gods ignored you, the forum spat you out, and now, like every other worn-down wretch with nothing better to do, you make your way toward the only form of culture that the empire truly believes in: spectacle. Not the kind with poetry and tasteful string instruments. No, you're going to the Theatrum Populi, where the plays are loud, the crowds are louder, and the air smells like the inside of a gladiator's sock. The street outside the theater is already a mess. Hawkers push skewers of something they insist is meat. One of them is roasting a squirrel. Another holds a tray of grilled sparrows and screams, 7 for a denarius, 8 if you hate your teeth. Children run between legs, barefoot and snot-faced, selling stale nuts and gossip. You nearly trip over a one-eyed goat with a sign around its neck that reads, "Not for sale." He bites. You find your place in line, which is not really a line at all, more of a horizontal riot in slow motion. The poor don't buy seats here. They earn them with elbows and profanity. Everyone pushes forward like bread is being thrown from heaven. You get jabbed in the ribs by an old woman. You jab her back. It's friendly. Sort of. A man cuts in front of you. You recognize him. He owes you a copper. You say nothing. You're not here to fight. You're here to forget. Inside, the theater smells like wet wool, garlic, and someone's unfinished funeral. The stone seats are hot from the sun, slick from the previous occupant's sweat. You lower yourself down and immediately regret not bringing a cushion, or at least thicker skin. The man beside you, broad, bald, loud, lets out a belch that echoes. The woman on your other side is breastfeeding while hurling insults at the stage before the actors have even appeared. A pigeon shits directly into the lap of a man 2 rows down. The audience cheers. The man takes a bow. Then the curtain rises. The play begins. It's supposed to be a comedy or a tragedy, but here, the line is so thin it's practically decorative. The actors shout. They wave their arms. They fall over furniture. The plot involves a lost goat, an unfaithful wife, a talking urn, and several extremely creative ways to say your mother. You don't understand half of it, and neither does the crowd. That doesn't matter. They're here for the noise, the gestures, the familiar rhythm of farce dressed up as theater. One actor moons the audience. A man in the front row throws a turnip in approval. Someone yells, "Do it again." He does. Then come the interludes. Jugglers. Dancers. One man walks a tightrope while reciting excerpts from Virgil. He falls. The crowd roars. No one helps him up. A group of dwarves performs a mock battle using wooden spoons and pig bladders. You're pretty sure you saw one of them selling leeks earlier this morning. They are infinitely more talented than the actual actors. You feel something wet hit your shoulder. You look up. No clouds, no pigeons. The man behind you is drooling in his sleep. You move 2 seats over. No one notices. Suddenly, the tone shifts. The next play begins, darker, bloodier. A myth, perhaps, or a dramatized public shaming. There are no clear roles, just shouting, fake deaths, and real bruises. The lead actor screams a monologue about betrayal, fate, and intestinal worms. Someone in the back stands and yells, "Same." The theater erupts in laughter. The actor throws down his mask and storms off. He's replaced by a teenager wearing half a lion pelt and nothing else. The plot is abandoned. It becomes a contest of insult versus acrobatics. You're not sure if it's theater, gladiator training, or social therapy. And still you watch. Because here, in this reeking bowl of noise and grime, something happens that never happens in the streets, or the temple, or the Senate. People forget who they are. For 1 hour, maybe 2, the layman next to you isn't begging. The fish seller isn't shouting. You aren't starving. You are all audience, all mouths open, all hearts momentarily distracted from the slow rot of daily life. A fight breaks out in the 5th row. Real fists. Blood sprays. Someone cheers. The guards don't intervene. They've placed bets. The actors incorporated into the scene. The play now includes a drunken uncle, 2 left sandals, and 3 actual teeth on the floor. The audience is delighted. Then just like that, it ends. There is no applause, just groaning, coughing, farting, and the collective sigh of people returning to their real lives. You stand. Your legs protest. Your back reminds you it has not forgiven you. You stretch. You look around. The actors bow. One picks his nose and tosses into the crowd. It is somehow poetic. Outside, the sun is lower now. The heat still clings to the buildings, but the light has softened. You leave the theater lighter in the chest, heavier in the feet. The crowd disperses, back to stalls, to benches, to alleys and tenements and drinking spots where the wine is mostly water and the cups are mostly stolen. You walk slowly, unsure whether you're laughing or just remembering how. Rome is still Rome, but for a little while, it was absurd enough to be bearable. The Roman market isn't a place. It's a creature, a snarling, squirming, coin-gobbling thing with 1,000 mouths and none of them honest. It breathes garlic and groans in Latin, and if you don't keep your eyes open and your purse knotted tight, it'll chew through both before you can say, "That wasn't pork." You head there late in the day, after the theater. Your stomach, having endured hours of drama and vinegar sweat, demands a tribute. But the market is no sanctuary. It's a battlefield, one where you are always underarmed, underfed, and overcharged. You smell it before you see it. Overripe fruit, fried fish, trampled herbs, manure, ash, old blood, and bad ambition. The air itself is greasy. It coats your teeth. You step into the marketplace like a soldier entering enemy territory. You scan for weakness. You find none. Everyone here wants something from you, and they're not afraid to scream about it. "Fresh apples," yells a man holding a basket of what can only be described as wet bruises with stems. "Best figs in Rome," shouts a woman swatting flies with one hand and scratching herself with the other. A boy no older than 10 tries to sell you a cracked amphora full of yesterday's soup. You ask what's in it. He says opportunity. You walk faster. Stalls are crammed so close together they blur. Fish lie gasping in bowls of lukewarm water. Chunks of goat meat hang from hooks beside strings of onions and promises. There are grapes swarmed by wasps, lentils crawling with enthusiasm, and bread that would be better served as construction material. You approach a fruit vendor with a basket of pears. You pick one up. It's soft in the middle and hard on the outside. The edible version of Roman politics. You ask how much. He names a price high enough to insult 3 generations of your ancestors. You laugh. He calls your mother a whore. You tell him she trained under his sister. He chuckles. You haggle. In the end, you buy 3 pairs and a slap on the back, which may or may not have dislodged a flea colony. The fruit is already sweating in your hand. You bite into one. It's sweet, then sour, then mealy, then gone. You eat the core and consider licking your fingers, but remember where they've been. You pass the spice merchant next. His stall is a shrine to color: saffron, pepper, cumin, fennel, and dust. Mostly dust. You sniff a jar of something labeled Goddess Blend and nearly sneeze your soul out through your nose. He offers you a sample of cinnamon that looks suspiciously like shredded bark. You decline. He offers it again, this time claiming it's an aphrodisiac. You decline faster. A crowd forms near the butcher. Not because the meat is good, it's not, but because someone's passed out in front of the stall. He's shirtless, bleeding from the head, and cradling a chicken that might be dead or just deeply disappointed. A debate erupts. Was he poisoned, beaten, or simply drunk? The butcher uses the distraction to sell spoiled sausages at half price. You consider it, then don't. Someone bumps you. Hard. You check your pouch. Still there. You check your bread. Gone. You spin around, see a child grinning with half your loaf in her mouth. She runs. You don't chase her. You'd have done the same. You've done the same. The market noise crescendos as the sun begins to dip. Arguments become fights. Vendors begin shouting at one another over stolen barrels, fake scales, and whether or not an eel counts as a religious offering. A guard tries to intervene. He slips on a tomato and is immediately buried beneath a crate of cabbages. The crowd laughs. The cabbage vendor claims divine retribution. Business continues. You make your way to the Olive Man, a legend, a crook, a genius. He sells 3 kinds: wrinkled and salty, smooth and bitter, and what he calls for brave souls, which look like shrunken eyeballs marinated in resentment. You buy a handful of the cheapest, eat 2, and regret both. They fight in your stomach like gladiators with poison knives. Still, you feel less hollow. That counts. Then, as quickly as it bloomed, the market begins to close. Vendors pack up with the efficiency of survivors. Unsold produce is swept into piles, some for pigs, some for the poor, some for neither. You see a beggar scraping the ground with a broken spoon, scooping lentil mush into a cracked cup. You nod to him. He nods back. He keeps scraping. You leave the marketplace with a pear core, olive breath, and less dignity than you arrived with. But your belly isn't empty. Your pockets still jingle, barely. And most importantly, you're still wearing your sandals. The sky is turning purple now. Rome cools, but only on the surface. Beneath its stones, the hunger and heat remain. You walk home, tasting vinegar and dust, gripping your pouch like a lifeline, your sandals squelching with something that definitely wasn't wine. In Rome, you never conquer the market. If you're lucky, you survive it. There is no warning. There never is. No trumpet, no shout, no celestial sign. It begins the way most things in Rome begin, with a smell. You're halfway home, your arms still sticky from olive brine, your brain fogged by heat and exhaustion when it hits you. That sharp, acrid scent that lances through the usual city stench like a blade through soft cheese. Burning. Something is burning. You pause. You sniff. You listen. Then you hear it. The pop, the hiss, the rising scream. Not human at first, just air, as if the city itself has decided to exhale and flame. You round a corner and see it, a flicker of orange where orange doesn't belong. A roof, 3 stories up, coughing smoke like a drunk on his deathbed. Then another cry, this one definitely human. You move fast, not toward the fire, you're not suicidal, but toward your own building because that's how this works. In Rome, when a fire starts, you don't ask whose fire. You assume it's about to be your fire. By the time you reach your insula, there's chaos. Children crying, goats bleeding, pots smashing. Someone is already dragging furniture into the street. A lopsided table, a jug of spoiled wine, a statue of Mercury missing its nose. You join the stampede, pushing up the stairs two at a time, your legs screaming in protest. The air inside is thick, not yet smoky but warm. Too warm. Your room is intact for now. You grab your pouch, your sandals, the cloak you sleep under, and a clay idol of Fortuna that you stole last year, and have felt mildly bad about ever since. You hesitate. The mattress? No. Too heavy. The food? Already moldy. The neighbor's cat? Missing, probably smarter than you. You barrel back down as the noise outside swells. Not panic, not exactly, but preparation. Because this is not a rare event. This is Rome. Things burn. Buildings fall. It's Tuesday. The fire is now visible, licking out from a top-floor window 2 blocks over, the sky above it dark with smoke, the wind beginning to shift it sideways. You hear someone shout for the Vigiles, the city's supposed firefighting force, and you laugh. Not out loud, just bitterly inside your ribcage. The Vigiles will come. Eventually, maybe with buckets, maybe with curses, maybe with nothing but a list of who forgot to pay their fire tax. Meanwhile, the people act. Men form a sloppy chain from the nearest fountain, which is dry. Someone dumps a bucket of rainwater on the street in confusion. A woman shrieks at her husband to grab the chicken coop. He grabs the chickens, not the coop. One escapes into the crowd. Someone steps on it. The crowd screams. You stand in the middle of it all, clutching your sad bundle of belongings, eyes fixed on the plume of smoke that now curls like a snake above the rooftops. The fire hasn't reached you yet. It might not. But you know this city. You know how fast the wind turns, how dry the timbers are, how close the roofs lean toward each other like gossiping crones. Then a crash. Not wood, but something heavier. A wall? A cart? A body? You don't look. You don't want to know. The heat intensifies. You feel it across your cheek like a sunburn that hasn't asked permission. The crowd is now split between those trying to save things, those trying to steal things, and those trying to pray the flames away. The prayers are mostly curses, directed at the gods, the emperor, the landlord, and the neighbor who definitely caused this with his illegal cooking fire. You see him, actually, that neighbor, standing near a heap of ash that used to be his belongings. He is staring, unmoving, as if the flames have charmed him. You think of grabbing him. Then you think better of it. And then, at last, the Vigiles arrive. 3 of them. One is shirtless, carrying a bucket. One is drunk. The third is arguing with a vendor about wine prices. They take one look at the blaze, confer briefly, then begin shouting orders no one follows. Someone tosses a bucket of sewage into the flames. It does nothing. Someone else throws a blanket. It catches fire instantly. Applause. Eventually, mercifully, the fire slows. Whether from exhaustion, a shift in the wind, or sheer boredom, it begins to flicker and spit rather than roar. Buckets of water, real ones this time, are thrown. Tiles fall from rooftops. A man tries to climb a wall to save his laundry. He falls. The laundry burns. When it's over, no one claps. No one cheers. The crowd simply stands there, coughing, blackened, scorched, angry, and silent. Like soot-covered ghosts pretending they haven't just watched half a block disintegrate. Your building is safe for now, but the street smells different. Charred, hollow, and something in you does too. You walk back toward your insula, stepping over wet ash, broken pots, and a melted sandal that might have once belonged to a senator. You pass the neighbor with the chickens. He has one left. It's limping. He cradles it like a baby. You reach your door. You step inside. And though your ceiling is still above your head, your world is smaller now. By heat, by fear, by one more near death you won't talk about. Because in Rome, disaster isn't news. It's maintenance. The day dies slowly. Not like a candle being snuffed, but like an old man collapsing one joint at a time, quietly, bitterly, with the kind of resignation that doesn't make a sound. Rome never truly sleeps. You've heard people say it does, but that's a lie. What Rome does is settle into a different kind of chaos. a lower, darker rhythm of flickering flames, muttering breath, and exhausted eyes. The fires burn lower. The children stop screaming. The pigs stop running. The dust doesn't rise anymore. It just hangs in the air like a memory of motion. And you, bruised, hungry, and one fresh blister wiser, begin the slow, creaking return to the hole in the wall you pretend is home. You walk slower now, not just because your feet hurt, although they do deeply in ways that feel biblical, but because your body is full of the weight of the day. Your arms still remember hauling water. Your back still holds the impression of the forum's stone step where you sat too long. Your eyes sting with the smoke of the fire that didn't kill you. Your head hums with the dull, background ache of hunger, wine fumes, shouting, bad jokes, and unprocessed fear. Even your breath feels heavier. The kind of breath that carries not just air, but the smell of everything you walked through today. Ash, urine, vinegar, fish sauce, cheap oil, and old bread. It's inside you now. You carry it home like you carry everything else, because you have no choice. By the time you reach your insula, the sun has disappeared completely, dragging the last bit of color out of the sky like a thief yanking a rug. Darkness spills across the walls, pooling in corners, swallowing alleys. A single torch burns at the bottom of the stairwell, just enough to cast shadows of the cracks in the wall, not enough to show where the missing steps are. You climb carefully, one hand on the stone, the other holding what little you salvaged from the day. Your pouch, slightly lighter than this morning. A crust of bread, already hardening in your fist, and the heat of 100 conversations that will echo in your ears long after you've forgotten their words. Inside your room, if it can still be called that after what happened today, the air is stale and thick. The brazier is cold. The straw smells like wet feet. Someone is already pissed in the corner. Someone else is snoring in a way that sounds like dying. You step over bodies and belongings and find your corner, the same square of wall you always return to, the only part of this entire city that doesn't pretend to be something it's not. You sit, slowly. Your knees crack. Your ankles throb. Your bones seem to sigh louder than your mouth. You chew your bread without tasting it. You sip from your water skin, now more leather than liquid. You rest your head against the wall, feeling the texture of cracked plaster against your scalp. And for a moment, you let yourself not think, not remember, not want. Just be. Just breathe. Around you, the room fills with the sounds of ending. The low cough of the old woman whose lungs have given up on ambition. The soft whimper of the child whose dreams are darker than the room. The rustling of lice across fabric. The faint slap of a rat's footfall across a rafter. Outside, in the city, a distant scream. Then silence. Then a dog barking. Then a laugh. Then nothing. Someone breaks the stillness by lighting a lamp. The flicker casts long shadows across the room, turning everyone into something older, stranger, less human. For a few minutes, the group shares warmth. Not physical, there's none of that, but something else. The kind of warmth that lives in shared suffering. Someone begins to hum. Someone else mumbles a joke. You can't make out the words, but the rhythm is familiar. There's comfort in it, even when it makes no sense. No one talks about the fire. Not directly. Someone mentions a neighbor who didn't make it out. Someone else says nothing and just stares at the wall. There's no mourning. Not yet. That comes in the gaps between bites, in the way someone's shoulders sag when they think no one's looking. You recognize it because it lives in you too. You think about the man who stood screaming in the forum, about the girl who stole your bread and ran, about the goat tied to a post who looked more at peace than anyone you know. You think about the boy in the theater who got hit in the face with a sausage and laughed so hard he fell off the bench. You think about the priest who didn't bless you, the guard who didn't stop the thief, the neighbor who saved a chicken but forgot his wife. You think about Rome, enormous, loud, indifferent Rome, and how it keeps spinning, keeps devouring, keeps building itself out of your bones, your sweat, your story. And then you lie down. There's no ceremony, no privacy, no comfort, You curl up on the straw. Your ribs press into the floor. Your blanket smells like 10 other people and 3 dead ones. The cat returns, steps onto your stomach, and settles there like royalty on a corpse. You let it. Its warmth is the closest thing to kindness you'll touch tonight. Your eyes close slowly. The weight behind them is heavy. Not from sleep, exactly. From fatigue, yes, but also from memory. From everything you saw, everything you smelled, everything that got scraped into your skin like dirt you'll never wash out. And yet, just before the dark takes you fully, you hear something, not noise, not really. Just breath. The breath of the city, the breath of those around you, the breath of those still alive. And you realize with a kind of resigned awe, you made it. One more day, one more time. Through filth, fire, theater, theft, prayer, and bread that could be used as roofing tile, you survived. Tomorrow, Rome will rise again. So will the heat. So will the shouting, the taxes, the hunger, the blisters, the smoke. And so will you. Not because you are strong, not because you were chosen, but because that's what you do. You live, you wake, you begin again.